Now joining me on the news at 10 is Dr. Ayo Teriba, CEO of Economic Associates. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, you spoke on Channels TV quite recently. You spoke about the establishment of a Treasury single account to promote transparency and probity.
That's correct.
And now the President has done just that.
Commendably.
So, commendable.
Commendably.
Okay, so in practical terms, how will it operate?
Right. Prior to this time, you had a situation in which many government agencies had the autonomy to receive revenue on behalf of the federal government, or on behalf of the federation, actually. And they had the liberty to spend what they wanted out of the revenue, and were only required to remit a fraction of the surplus that they declare.
All right.
And that was increasingly being abused. You have agencies, who construct capital projects at will. You have other forms of leakages. You had situations of abuses. So it's necessary for the country to let all revenue due to the government come into this, one account. Mm-hmm. Let's know what's coming. And all agencies would go through appropriation process without exception.
Now, some people who do business with the government have actually complained in the past that there was not enough access to their own funds, that is the MDAs. So with this, is there not a possibility that there could be bottlenecks now that the funds are all domiciled in one account?
Well, we should learn to push the country to a situation where our operations become efficient. We cannot use the issue of efficiency to promote opacity. We need transparency. A situation in which you don't know how much revenue is due to government. The government revenue gets intercepted. Nigeria is the poorer for it. We can't even deliver basic, government services. We can't equip the military. Has to stop. Transparency, when it comes to that, we'll deal with it. There will be advocacy to ensure transparency, but you cannot, sacrifice the need for more transparency, on the altar of efficiency. All
right. Now, what about the banks? Because we understand that they're quite nervous about a liquidity squeeze. So how is this going to affect them?
Well, I do not think that this necessarily has to affect the banks negatively. We're talking of not really a single account. We're talking of a family of accounts consolidated into one, controlled centrally from the Treasury. So I presume much of the funds will still remain with the banks, but will be monitored centrally. And if the Treasury decides to place funds with the banks, it will also be centrally coordinated. So right. I do not think we should panic about this. It does not mean that all government money would go to the central bank, or central bank wouldn't place deposits. Government will still, the banks will still, subscribe to government's treasury bill. So it would make sense that government's funds still, be kept in Nigerian banks.
Okay, now this new system presumably is going to require those who prepare budgets to do so very carefully, very meticulously, because mistakes will just not be accommodated.
And delays could be damaging in some MDs. So be it. We need to prepare budgets more quickly. But you will not be able to if you don't have transparency about what funds are available. So it's good that these steps have been taken. In some cases, you might require, to amend existing legislation to reduce the autonomy that past legislation has given some agencies. But that will also push us, to reassure ourselves to also maybe have legislation that ensures that budgets are prepared well in advance and that funds are released also as at Wendy.
Okay, now, since this account has been set up in accordance with the 1999 Constitution, what role, as a final question, what role should the National Assembly play to ensure that it works effectively? In
cases where the acts, establishing some agencies had given them outright autonomy, I think the National Assembly will do well to remove such autonomy. Government revenue should, in the first instance, accrue into a central purse, and all agencies will go through appropriation. So, National Assembly, I've had the Senate President made comments about the single treasury account as well. So, I don't think this is going to be a problem. I do think that the executive and the legislature are on the same page on this.
All right, but maybe you could just give us a little bit more information about the modalities for the effective operation of this account, and, well, presumably there might also be some challenges or pitfalls.
Well, I presume it's a fairly straightforward thing. What the previous regime had done was to start the idea, but they excluded a significant segment of the MDAs from the directive. So what the current regime has done is to include all agencies. And I'm afraid some of the ones that are excluded are the ones with the most funds. So it's good to have everybody involved, to have all government revenue, whoever generates it, consolidated into a single account. And where laws allow any agency exclusion from the process, the National Assembly can take care of that by amending the legislation.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Dr. Ayo Teriba about the Treasury single account. The Edo State government says it was its intervention that ended the attempted forceful relocation of the internally displaced persons in the state. The special advisor to the governor on media and public affairs, Kasim Afebua, told Channels Television that those who attempted the relocation did so without informing the state government. He advised against politicizing an issue that concerns the safety and future of Nigerians, a subject which he says the state governor takes very seriously. Now, the governorship contest in Yobe State is continuing at the tribunal as a top official of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission appears before the tribunal, which summoned the EFCC over an allegation of bribery during the April 11 governorship election in Yobe State. There's been a lot of allegations and counter-allegations, and to ensure a thorough investigation, the Yobe State Election Petition Tribunal sitting in Abuja threatened at the last sitting to issue a bench warrant for the EFCC if it fails to honor its summons to testify.
Allegations of bribery and other electoral irregularities are among what the petitioner, the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Adamu Waziri, is relying upon in this case. Having issued 2 summons earlier, the tribunal on Friday threatened to issue a bench warrant to compel the anti-graft agency to appear before it if it fails to honor the last summon on Monday. The secretary to the EFCC, however, honored the summon but could not testify as he told the court that he was unaware of previous summons.
Today's proceeding started with the EFCC secretary that came to court, but he could not testify. He told the tribunal that he was not aware of the subpoena that was served in his office. Thereafter, we started calling other witnesses that we have their statement already filed before the court.
Meanwhile, the tribunal cross-examined 9 other witnesses from the petitioner, including party agents and INEC supervisors during the polls. At the end of the cross-examination, both the petitioner and lead counsel to the 3rd and 4th respondents expressed confidence in the proceedings.
I have confidence in the process. The court is doing everything that it should do. The lawyers were cooperating among ourselves, and the witnesses, they are testifying. So the procedure is going on smoothly. No problem.
I'm sure that the judiciary, being the last hope of the common man, will do its bit to look at this case on its merit and its judgment will go a long way in strengthening democracy.
The tribunal has adjourned to Tuesday, the 12th of August 2015, when the EFCC is expected to testify.
The doctors in Imo State are on the warpath as the leadership of resident doctors at the Imo State University Teaching Hospital, Olu, Imo State, has announced an indefinite strike. They claim the state government is yet to implement the consolidated medical salary scale of resident doctors in the center. Briefing newsmen in Olu, the president of the Association of Resident Doctors, Imo State University Teaching Hospital, Dr. Samson Ejikunle, said the association is appealing to the state government to correct this anomaly.
We gave the authority, that's the government, a threat for strike action, followed by a 5-day warning strike, and nothing came out of it. Eventually, we don't have any other option but to go into indefinite strike. It is important to note that it is quite regrettably, this strike is actually unnecessary and avoidable if the government had done the needful. Because prior to this, many things have happened, and we have tried to explain why this should not be necessary. This strike is primarily due to corrected consolidated medical salary structure, which is called corrected comments.
Well, it's now time for business news, and here's Imana Amawe.
You first. First Bank.
Hello and welcome to Business News. President Muhammadu Buhari has called on Nigeria's elite to be prepared to contribute more meaningfully towards helping the country overcome its current challenges. President Buhari was speaking at an audience with the outgoing president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Donald Kaberuka. According to the president, the privileged and influential citizens clearly have to do more now than in the past to help the country deal successfully with its economic and security problems. He also told Mr. Kaberuka that his administration will welcome more support from the AFDB for projects in versatile sectors like agriculture that can easily be explored to create more jobs for unemployed Nigerians. The outgoing AFDB president told President Buhari that some development institutions like the World Bank, the German Development Bank and the European Development Bank had already indicated their readiness to provide long-term loan facilities to small businesses in Nigeria. And the Complaints Bureau unit of the National Insurance Commission has for the first half of the year resolved 34 complaints arising from disputes over delayed or non-settlement of genuine insurance claims. This was contained in a statement from the Commission, which further explains that it facilitated the payment of 539.76 million naira to the various complainants for the period in review. 147 complaints were received from policyholders, beneficiaries or their representatives, although most of these complaints are at advanced stages of being resolved. The Commission employs a civil process of resolving these disputes and complaints through correspondences and mediation meetings between all stakeholders. Meanwhile, Transnational Corporation of Nigeria has received an approval in principle from the Securities and Exchange Commission for the proposed merger of its power business subsidiaries, that's Transcorp, Ugeli Power Limited and Ugeli Power PLC. The proposed merger is expected to bring overall management and operational efficiency to the company's power business. Transcorp has also notified the Nigerian Stock Exchange of the planned merger following the SEC's approval on Thursday, August the 6th. The company plans to hold a court-ordered meeting in accordance with and subject to an order that will be granted by the Federal High Court for the meeting. And the Nigerian equities market closed flat today, though the bulls were favored as the all-share index appreciated by 0.01%. Here's Bolaji Akinwale with details.
Hello, welcome to the Stock Market Report. The Nigeria equities markets began the week on a positive note as the all-share index gained 0.01% at 31,400 446.42 points. The market capitalization closed at 10.7 trillion naira. On the gainers chart, Mobil topped with 5 naira. It comes ahead of Dangote Cement with a price gain of 4 naira and 7up with 1 naira 50 kobo. On the decliners table, oil markets and stock, 40 oil recorded the highest price loss of 4 naira. It comes ahead of Nigeria Breweries with 3 naira 50 kobo and PZ with 1 naira 46 kobo. Investors' appetite was shown in the volume of trade for Intransacts, which pulled 40.4 million shares. Zenith Bank and Transcorp also pulled some weight. Zenith Bank recorded 16.8 million shares, while Transcorp had 9.6 million shares. Transcorp has gotten approval in principle from the SEC for proposed merger of its business subsidiaries, that is, Transcorp Ugeli Power Limited and Ugeli Power PLC. And that's it on the stock market reports. I am Bolaji Akinwale.
Many thanks, Bolaji. Well, that's it on Business News. I'm Emana Amawe. Bimbo will be back with the rest of the news at 10 in a moment.
You first. First Bank.
President Muhammadu Buhari is not leaving anything to chance as he begins the repositioning of his anti-corruption campaign. To strengthen the process, the Presidential Advisory Committee, headed by Professor Pt.3 Sagay, a prominent professor of law and civil rights activist, has been appointed. The committee's brief is to advise the present administration on the prosecution of the war against corruption and the implementation of required reforms in Nigeria's criminal justice system. Other members of the committee are Professor Femi Adekunle, Dr. Mrs. Benedicta Dauda, Professor E. Alemika, Professor Sadiq Rada, and Hadiza Bala Usman. The results for the May-June examinations may have been released, but those of sponsored candidates from 13 states indebted to WAEC are being withheld. WAEC's head of national office, Dr. Charles Egurudu, told journalists in Lagos today that the withheld results may be released as soon as the council gets its payment from the schools. Among those who sat for the examination, 864,096 were male, while 729,346 were female. The examination body has fully released 94.01% of the total results. Still ahead on the news at 10, table tennis star Segun Toriola says Nigerian players can only have global impact if coaches upgrade themselves. Please stay with us.